on record. And so, so I thought for MicroGiants, we would start with this story from McKinsey. What this is really talking about is the quickening. If you're feeling a whiplash, it might be that 10 years, we've jumped forward 10 years, they say, in just 90 days time. So, and here's what they're saying the leap is. Now, this is from a technical perspective. And so what they mean is that we have had adoption sort of e-commerce kinds of applications at this rate along here that you can see. And you can see how steady it has been. Then there's a slight uptick in 2019, which a lot of us were talking about. And I've been pushing pretty hard for clients, former clients, to pick up the pace. By most small clients, we're talking about get your website, tuned in, get a formal, ongoing, consistent content program going, pay attention to basic SEO on your pages, and start thinking about e-commerce and services that can be offered online. Just get your brain around this whole idea and get started. And I'll tell you, it's been, as you've heard me say, it's been slow. A lot of people have missed the boat on this. And so now what's happened is with COVID is we've seen this incredible jump. And so it's gone from where we were a year and a half ago to about 15% adoption. These are the numbers of customers that are deeply embedded with e-commerce. And it's gone up to almost 35% in a single, 6-month period of time. After studying consumer behavior for 40 years, I mean, things don't change this fast. This is really a major, major thing in terms of consumer behavior, perhaps equivalent to the adoption of the internet, well, that's what we're talking about. But say television or the radio, which was adopted very fast. And from radio to TV to the internet, the adoption for 50% of the population has literally been half the number of years. So radio was, believe it or not, it was 20-some years. TV was 12 or 15 years. And to get to that same point with the internet, it was about 6 or 7 years. So those are the people that have used the internet. But now when we're talking about adoption of e-commerce and the concept that people are using a lot more stuff from the internet and buying on it, now we've had this huge jump. If we take a look at the people who are changing, this is really remarkable. So what they're basically saying is that the people who are reconsidering loyalties, well, what does that mean? That means they've allowed their normal patterns, behavior patterns to be disrupted, and they're trying something new. This, again, is something very difficult to get to happen. In the retail business, we used to say that we had to have a customer come to the physical location 3 times before it was top of mind for them to stop in. So they're driving down the street. If they'd been there once, twice, no habit form. If they come in 3 times, then you can get them to think about coming in every time they go by the store because they now have a familiarity. And so if your product comes up, they need that, you have a pretty good chance that you're going to get some recognition. Same kind of thing for the internet. Probably more than 3 times because there's so many internet you can review in a very short period of time. So this is pretty amazing. So 60% of the customers expect to integrate new brands and stores into their lives. 75% have tried different stores, websites, or brands during this period. So when you think of trying to break somebody away from, we'll say, Amazon, that's a hard thing to do. I myself have tried to wean myself off of Amazon, and I have not been able to do it. So it's a tough thing to do. I keep trying to go to Home Depot to buy things. I've tried, I do woodworking, and so I've tried going directly to 3 or 4 companies to buy hardware or tools. And you know what? They're not able to satisfy the wide range of products, quick delivery. Uh, you really have to try hard not to use Amazon or to actually break away from it. But what this is telling us is that things are happening now. And so it's an opportunity to begin to get people to think differently about whatever it is that you're selling. Let's see. And I think this was the sort of deeper dive that had the graphics on it. By the way, this is a really nice format that they have here. They do, as you saw, they did, really nice page, not too much text, get you involved, get you a little bit involved with, say, a subtext, subhead. Then it takes you to the detail. Let's see. So here we have a chart that I kind of liked, which is trying to break this into who's performing and who's not performing. What they've come up with is a gap in profits between the top performers, in other words, those who are well adopted, and those who have not adopted. And this is really, really amazing. If you go from the 0 line, you've got the top quintile, so the top 20% are up 335%. The bottom are down 303%. This is the bottom 20%. Those in the middle are still down. And so when people are talking about the big 4 or the big 5, TI IT companies, they are really complaining about what they're seeing, which is kind of obvious, I guess, that they're up here. If you take a look at the stock market, all of the tech stocks are doing exceptionally well. And then you have the Procter and Gamble's, the oil companies, of course, are not doing well right now in the stock market. Sort of the baseline folks, except for the direct COVID related companies like Kodak. Did you happen to hear that? Kodak got approval to make one of the baseline pharmaceutical chemicals. Their stock went from $8 to $54 in 3 days. So Kodak might actually save themselves. That's kind of interesting. Then I think there was one more. Oh, this is sort of interesting. So which ones are doing well? Which ones are getting better? Which ones are getting worse? So this kind of shows you long-term where they think things are going. Semiconductors just through the roof. Software pretty much up there, depending on whether you do 2018 to long-term, but software would be number 2. So the conversations, Edgar and Dave, we've had about sort of a software-centric approach to building a small business, utilizing different applications, is like Soho as a strong example of integrated pieces. That's an indication that there's a lot going on there. Of course, when you dig deeper, this breaks all apart because the little software guys are not doing the job that the big ones are. So then other ones, pharmaceuticals, naturally, we all understand that one. Personal products. This is an interesting part of the industry combinations here, and that is that personal products mean a whole lot of things. But I think they're talking about, personal care, hair, nails for women, deodorant, that kind of thing. But it also has to do with a wider range of things, which might be other products that go a little bit beyond what we would consider personal, but consumer type products. Well, this is an area where it seems to be doing well, and I'm not sure why. But that would indicate that if you come up with a new product, there's still place to do product development. Then we're talking about technology hardware, and then media, which is kind of interesting. That, of course, is skewed towards online media. And then you take a look at all of these others that are really getting beat up: telecommunications, healthcare, consumer durables. service, all of these things that we sort of take for granted, automobiles, food retailing, that food retailing is only slightly up, despite that little strange anomaly when people were hoarding for a while. So this is just an indication. There's a lot more to it. If you have more of an interest in getting into this one, you can go to McKinsey and Company. It's mckinsey.com. And this particular article is business functions, and the name of the whole thing is 550, the quickening, and that would get you to this article if you wanted to. Yeah, here it is here, 550, the quickening. Kind of interesting. So I had a couple other things that I was going to jump into in terms of news, but I think maybe I took a little more time on that than I thought. Anybody have any comments or questions just about, you know, this whole issue of this article and the whole issue of deeper e-commerce adoption? Any comments or thoughts about that or questions?
Well, I've got just a comment from days gone by, and it would be in relationship to data confidentiality and data use. And that's, of course, a lot of corporations now putting together their own intranets and attempting to have...
I do have...
So, can you hear me, Ron?
Yeah, you're good. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, good.
Where that came from.
Yeah, no problem. And so part of this is the ability of a small company who is, you know, working on relationships and building relationships and associations with each other and sharing information. And there doesn't seem to be a very easy platform right now that has been developed that will allow all of those things to take place, keeping confidentiality of data and documents at one level, of relational connections on a second level, and then communications that go on a third level. And I know did a little work with some people with DoD a couple of years back, and they were using a variety of what was then the early stages of WhatsApp and a couple of other communication protocols to achieve, you know, encrypted safe communications, but they still didn't have the ability to share data sets and information apart from known groups. So yeah, just a little bit of dialogue on that.
Yeah, okay. Well, it is interesting. Now, just because we're talking about commence, one thing they did that I liked a long time ago is that they encrypt everything from the second you hit enter. And so it's encrypted on your own machine, but of course you're in the app, and so it kind of opens it up instantly. And they use a technology which is used a lot now, but it wasn't when they invented this. This is back in the mid-90s, which was brand new technology at the time. And what they do is they do transfer of data back and forth. So it keeps a very technical protocol to make sure that the data doesn't overwrite by keeping track of when things come in from certain machines, etc. But the encryption on the internet, I mean, they started off with doing it via email, and then they got more sophisticated as the networks were better, but they still do encryption. And so there is a one company that encrypts everything so that you can only see it on the desktop. That's a nice idea. But in terms of these connections, first level, second level, I don't know. Without some programming, I don't know who does that. Because obviously what you're trying to do, John, is to kind of use those connections as a third-party referral system. Is that right? So that you could say, I've got a customer who's been really satisfied with services, and I'd like to just call on them to introduce me to a specific person who I just happen to know that they know. So I think that's what you're talking about, which I think it's a
variation of that. Absolutely true.
Yeah, and for consulting types of things, for what Edgar and David are doing, that makes additional sense for them as well, because it's going to be the referrals that will really make the difference when you're little. That's one way you get around the big guys, is you stay in your niche, keep your head down, and do this personal referral and build relationships so that somebody doesn't come along and lock your head off. And we've talked about that several times as a marketing strategy. So, okay, good. Any other comments? We will move on then. I'll get rid of this and we'll go to this third piece that, and this is a little shorter, so we'll have plenty of time to open it up, I think, and talk it through. This really here is sort of the end of the last piece of customers, and then moving on to targeting new customers. And I know John is working on this exact problem for his new business. And it's the kind of thing really that I think we're all going to be doing. And the question is, how do you really do it? So we're going to get into some nitty gritty on this particular one. So this is about targeting. So first of all, we know that we start with an 80-20 rule. We've all been through the kind of the analysis of where customers come from and how the Prado rule works, and how, generally speaking, 80% of our business is with only 20% of our customers. So a lot of times you just go, okay, we'll take the top 20%. In case of the dairy, what we do there is we say 50% of our customers came from 5 kinds of lifestyle segments. And so we're going to look for that. We're going to look for those top customers. But to get 80% of your business in your top 20 is a good place to start. So how do you really do this? Well, in B2B, and I'll just and keep in mind, we've gone through some of the B2C stuff with the dairy, but it's the same concept. It's just that you're dealing with customer attributes on B2C, and on B2B, you're dealing with industries, sub-industries, decision makers, and what it is that you're trying to solve. So the first thing we do is list opinion. Now, this works really well if you're in business. If you're brand new and you don't have a customer base, and then you have to kind of work around that a little bit, which I think both of you are kind of in. But when we do list appending, and I mentioned this briefly the other day, what you're doing is you're sending your list to a list aggregator who has a very large database. There are the 3 credit bureaus. Experian is one of them, and then Transamerica, and another one that starts with E that escapes my mind right at this moment. But those are the 3 big credit guys, and they do all kinds of marketing stuff as well. Most people don't think about them first. The second one, which is also a big company, is InfoUSA. And InfoUSA is a company I've used probably 10 to 15 years. And they started out as a list company. A list company just basically has a database. And then you can go through and you can select from the list whatever it is that you would like to do. We'll take a quick look at that perhaps here in a second. And so typically what you would do is you'd say, well, I would like a list. In fact, this is a good way to start for each of you. I would like a list that includes small businesses, X number of employees, say 20 employees, under 20 employees, or you could go 20 to 50, 50 to 100, pick the size of the company. You can also pick the size of the company based on the sales volume. That's not usually as relevant, I think, in terms of targeting as the number of employees that a company has, but it's available. You can do all kinds of other things too. You can select whether or not they have a location, a branch, if it's a branch location in your area. Of course, you can do geography in a wide variety of geographic opportunities there, from drawing a little circle around a point in the map, all the way up to counties, regions, etc., states, national. And so you can take a look at In some cases, some financial information. You can determine if they have their home office in your location. So, you know, pretty good selection of 6 or 8 or 10 different demographic elements that you can look at there. And of course, the most important one would be the basic industry and then the sub-industry. So there is the NACIS is what replaced the SIC codes. Those are industry codes. NA is North American and, you know, code, standard industrial code kind of thing. I can't remember the exact letters. I used to know them, but basically it's the old-fashioned SIC code where you can identify a tannery, a chocolate factory, all industry with less than 10 employees. You can take a look at professional, like attorneys or CPAs. You can look at restaurants. You can look at different kinds of restaurants. And so you can really zoom in on the industry, and that's very useful. So what you do when you append a list is you take your list of any, you know, 10 to 10,000 customers, knowing that these are your best customers, and you go through and you have them append their industry code to your list. And that's kind of the first step. They can send that back to you, and now you know your anonymous customers, you now know what industry they're in and what sub-industry by the number of digits that are attached to that. Very, very useful and not very expensive for the most part. It's not like it used to be. The second thing that they can do is that you can say to them, okay, you've appended my list and I know now who my customers are. And you may have them append a whole bunch of information or just 1 or 2 fields to your list. But then you can say, I'd like you to clone it. In other words, take my list and based on a geographic area, I would like you to now give me everybody in the geographic area that has the same basic industries as my list does. And so if you've got 5 or 6 or 20 industries that are there, they can go through and give you all of those industries of everybody else, not your list, but everybody else. They call that suppression. So they take the list, which they know it matches yours, and then they use your list, and then they simply dedupe the list and take all those out, and then they give you a brand new list, which is now a prospect list. So you now have your sort of basic targeting completed, and then you move on to other things. You want to know a little bit more about it. You can ask for different kinds of positions. So it's easy to get the president's position. It's easy to get the CFO. They give you their name. In a lot of cases, you can get emails. Emailing is not terribly effective to people you don't know. So I'm not sure if that's really valuable there. And you can actually piss people off before you even meet them if you give them too much email. So that's not the best idea. But you can still get names, and they can go in your database. And you can get depends on what you're looking for. John, for your particular list, you would want to get the HR executives, the HR manager, divisional manager, VP of HR, that sort of thing. And then so you can narrow this down and take your list, which maybe it'd have 1,000 people on it. And if you're just looking for a certain kind of person, you might get that down to 200 or 300 or 400 that are much better prospects. The smaller it is, the better they are because you got more time to follow up. In manufacturing, you can get the plant manager. And so there are a whole bunch of different managerial jobs. The bigger the company, the more people are attached. The smaller the company, the more likely it will be that it'll be the owner or the president or the CEO, and that will be who you want to talk to. So you could literally say, bring your list down, put it in your data set, and then start sending to or identify the HR person if you have one. But if you don't have an HR person, you might send it to a vice president. And if you don't have a vice president, you might send it to the president, so that you sort of go up the chain. If they don't have those people, there's a good chance that you'll go the right direction up the chain. If they do have those people, you're not upsetting and spamming people of whom it's very difficult to get a hold of anyway. You know, it's nearly impossible to get a president with email today. And in this in this climate, it's really hard to get an appointment. So you don't need to try and walk in and say hi. The old-fashioned sales stuff is, and we've talked about this, that is over. And there are several research pieces that have indicated that nobody wants people to come by anymore. They see visiting salespeople as a waste of their time, and they don't even let them in the door in many cases. So that as a sales tactic is pretty much over for many industries. Okay, so you've cloned it. Now the next thing you want to do is say, okay, well, what kind of decision makers do we want, and what's the journey that they take in order to buy things? So the personality is something that you can develop a personality profile, which I'll show you here in a second. But let's talk about the customer journey. Now, this is a concept that is, not that old, maybe 5 years, 6 years old. We used to have a triangle, which kind of indicated that you kind of crawl up and you try and meet the needs of each of these people based on a triangle. But research has indicated that that's not, in fact, how people buy. What they do is they start off somewhere in this loop. And their initial consideration, sorry, the N is off the side there, but the initial consideration goes through the active evaluation loop first as they're working their way towards a purchase. And on the way, you have got all of these things that you're using to communicate. You know, you want to know what the need is, or desire in some cases for consumers. You want to try and touch them on the internet. You want to touch them on social media. You want to educate them, and you also understand their education. You want to build your brand reputation, do some product comparisons, and finally, you're down here to where they're making a decision. Now they're going to go or no go on the purchase. Now, the interesting thing is that today, new research has basically shown that when they start here, they start off with I need to have a COVID test. They go to the internet and they start searching. Then they'll take a look at social. This might be reversed. They'll try to educate themselves on what are the opportunities for the testing. And then they'll start looking for, who are the brands I can trust? Can I go to a third-party referral? Do I know, say, Johnson & Johnson has got good products? Do I know that somebody doesn't have good products? And then they start comparing 2 or 3. So you can imagine yourself, your job is to go find the COVID testing, and this is what you're going through. And you finally get to the point to where you go, well, I think I'm ready. And this is the point here where people pick up the phone and they make a telephone call to your company. The interesting thing is that when sales reps get the phone call, the person who made the phone call is between 85 and 95% they're going to buy from you. So what does that mean? Well, this jumps into selling. Now it's like, well, wait a minute. We don't have to sell these things. They've already done that work. In fact, they don't want you telling them all about the product because they wanted to do the work themselves and convince themselves. You've got them. Now what you want to do is close them. And so you work on the kinds of things that are important just to get them to finish the deal. So once they make a purchase, Then they begin to go through the purchase experience. Now, in the old model, we never worried about that. It's like, well, you work your way up, and when you get to the top of the pyramid, you're good. Well, no, you're not, because they experienced this purchase. And so, what was the ease of purchase? The experience itself of buying. Did the product show up on time? And I find myself with Amazon being upset because some hardware that I bought was supposed to be here yesterday, didn't, and now I'm upset today. So it's like, if you tell them it's going to be there, it better be there. It's better to give them an extra day and deliver than it is to be wrong. So now that's a little black mark on that particular delivery. After it comes, and if it's something in particular that needs service, like consulting delivery, all kinds of administrative products, intangible kinds of things, what kind of service was it? And now they're on a very slow kind of ride around here. Every product is different, and you finally get a new purchase triggered. That trigger then sends them down to the loyalty loop, because now they're beginning to say, I did fine on the last one. I'm going to try this company for a similar product or the same product. And now you're going around and around. And if you can always deliver the product, the ease of purchase is there, meets all the standard, the specifications and all the requirements, then, and you continue to deliver it, then that experience keeps them in this loyalty loop, and you don't have to go through all this other stuff. So that's sort of the customer journey, and it can show up in different ways. Oops, there. So here we have, just as a different example, this is a little bit different customer journey. It's like, oh my gosh, if you're going to be buying insurance or a mortgage, you're starting up here, and here you go through this yes and no and maybe kind of decision models. This is a very complex decision model for a complex product. So you can see that you have to be prepared and ready at each one of these decision-making points to get them to go down the right path. In this kind of complex selling, and consultative selling it doesn't seem like it's this big of a customer journey, but they're going through just about as many decision processes. Are they going to deliver what I want? Are they going to require me to have a long-term contract? Are they going to try and load up other things on me that I don't want? Is this going to be good for the long term? And is the cost really fair? These are a whole bunch of things that they're asking for this type of a product. And so it can be really difficult and complex. Now, one of the ways that HubSpot recommends to differentiate all of these people you have in your database now is to begin to develop a difference of the buyer. So with a consumer, they're almost always the decision maker. Now, if you're buying a bed, there's a good chance you have to sell the spouse as well. If you are buying a car, you may have to sell the spouse or the uncle, or maybe even a 17, 16, 15-year-old kid who's going to drive it someday. So sometimes you've got more than one person, but for the most part in consumer business, this buyer persona is really them, an individual person. Think of it that way. In a B2B case, now you're talking about who the decision maker is. This is who you have to actually sell. You may have to convince the president, the board of directors, but whoever is really doing the due diligence in taking you along this path, this is the person that you want to understand. So here's some of the things that HubSpot says are part of what you would put into your personal, your buyer persona. And by the way, they really recommend that in the database that you name these people and you start putting people into categories of personas. So they say, well, what's the demographic information? We've talked a lot about that. What's their job level and their seniority? In big companies, this is pretty important. It's easy to talk to the wrong person. What day in their life, what does a day in their life look like? In other words, what they're trying to get you to do is just go through the mental exercise. Are they making decisions all day long with all kinds of people who are responsible to them? Are they working by themselves on projects because they are making decisions on buying? Or are they doing assessments of employees? Do they have a certain mixed bag? Do they work on teams? That kind of thing. It's like, what does their day really look and feel like? That helps you understand whether or not an email is going to be good, a telephone call, is that intrusive in their life? That's what they're trying to figure out as well. What's the kind of communication that we're going to use? What are their pain points, and what do you help them solve? Now, this goes to sort of the next big issue, and that is, what problem are you going to solve? But in this case, it's personalized. It's what problem do you solve for them? Because in some cases, all they want to do is make their life easier and make their job easier. And a lot of salespeople who misinterpret this completely miss how the sale works. And that is, they don't care about the features of your product. All they want is to make their job easier. So if you're selling, say, payroll services, you don't have to sell them on a whole bunch of features that you have. All you want to do is say, your job is going to be so much easier, and it's going to be accurate. And now they're perking up. My gosh, I am just beat up with what I have to get done every day, and I just can't do payroll, and I have got to get rid of something in my day, and what can you do to help my pain? Well, in that case, it's like, just take something off of their plate. So that's kind of, what does their day look like, and what does their pain look like, and what do you help them solve? Those are the powerful selling points. In terms of consumers, it could be something as simple as, I don't have to go to the store for milk. It could be something completely different. And that is, I really love that chair. I just love the design. It's going to fit with my furniture. And so you're dealing with a whole different set of things. It's important to know what you're trying to accomplish. And this forces you to go through and do that. What do they value most? You know, it's going to be different. You kind of have to have conversations with them. You kind of get in there. I'm buying some advertising for a client right now. I was looking at radio stations, and haven't done this for a while, and I don't really like doing it, but it's my job. So the way to start to look at radio stations is exactly the same as this. And that is, what are the demographics? How much what are their ads cost? How close are your demographics of the station? How close are those demographics to the targeted market that you have? So if you're looking for women with children at home, you go to the station and you say, give me your demographics. And then you can decide yourself who has the best demographics. And so it ranged from about 25 or 30 up to about 60%. So if the cost of an ad, a spot, is $100, the company that has 60% of your target market, multiply times that, and now the cost is, your real cost, effective cost of the spot is now $160. If it's 20%, the effective cost is higher than that. Did I do that right? I'm not sure I got the math right there. But you can see how the effective cost, the lower percentage of the demographic you're looking for, increases the effective price even more. And so the effective cost of one might be $120, $130, $140, and then the next one would be maybe $180. So the truth of the matter is that you can calculate what the effective cost is going to be across several stations, which is what I did. So now back to the point here. What do I value most? I went onto their websites, I asked them for their package, and I told them specifically what I wanted. And then, and I made it very clear, this is what I need for the evaluation. Now, what did I get? I got every single one of them came back to me trying to figure out number one, number two, number three, what was the client like? They wanted all that stuff. I'm not willing to give it to them. Why? First, time is an issue. Second, they can't evaluate this as well as I can because they're trying to sell me their deal. If I told them what I wanted, they would be lying to me about how they can deliver it. If I told them I wanted the highest female population, age appropriate with children, then of course that's all they would talk about. That's all they would send me. I wanted to know their demographics. So what happens? I get several telephone calls. I don't answer the phone because I don't take any calls from that particular area code if I don't know who it is. Plus, I knew what they were doing. They're leaving messages. Oh, hey, great, really professional. Just wanted to check in with you and see what it is you needed so I could get that information for you. No, I told you what I wanted. Now they've pissed me off. Now they have less of an opportunity to do business with me because they didn't do what I asked for. So we go through the period. One email I said, you didn't send me what I asked for, because the email came through and they said, oh, I just would like to know a little bit more about the business so that I can really help you. No, I don't want that. That's not what I asked for. And so I said specifically, I asked you previously if you would send me your demographics, and I'd like to know, and I need to know your rates. This is Friday afternoon. They had 2 or 3 days, and we're making a decision on Monday. Fair enough. What happens? I get a call on Monday. Gee, I just wanted to check and see how I can help you out. No, sorry. Do you realize we made the decision on Monday and you weren't in it? You didn't give me the specifications that I asked for. What did I value most? Follow my damn directions. That's all. They would have been included, and they might have gotten some money. I'm not going to have a conversation with them until they fulfill all of these things. I'm not interested in them telling me this stuff. I can do this. I'll make the decision based on that. They completely miss it, and that's what an overzealous salesman can do. Completely miss it. So when you're over here, you need to think through. You don't always know, but you better pay attention. What is it that they value? Do they want you to help them? Do they want you to deliver a product? Do they want a limited product? Do they want to be left alone? You've got to figure that out. You can only do it through some dialogue, and sometimes they won't give it to you because a good buyer keeps you off balance. They don't want you to know all of this stuff. You have to develop confidence first. They have to trust you first. I don't trust any of these guys who I solicited from them. They should be happy I even sent them a request. Okay, where do they go for information? Well, we know now that a huge percentage in business, B2B, huge percentage are using the internet. It's probably upwards of 90% now. So that's where you have to be. Now that's another whole discussion. How do you actually get their attention online? That's another whole discussion. That doesn't mean that third-party referrals and references and all that are not an important part of that. The more technical your product, the more information they'll need, and you have to have that available for them in the way they want it when they ask for it. And yes, you may have an opportunity to say, well, now have you considered this aspect? because I could give you a piece on that too. I've got a great infographic on this subject or on this technical aspect, but those are supplemental things that are helping them trust you. What experience are they looking for when seeking out your products and services? Well, you know, if you're buying bubble gum, the kind of experience that they expect is a whole lot different than if they're buying consulting services. You know, bubble gum, they're going to buy the same thing over and over and over and over again. That's because they developed a certain habit. They're not going to think a whole lot about it. They don't want to have a conversation, you know, with the checkout lady about, well, which gum should I buy? It's like, no, I just am going to grab it and buy it because it's completely incidental and I don't want to think about it. But that changes. The more infrequently they buy it and the more expensive it is, means that they want a different experience. And so you need to identify, and this is really in the long-term communication stream as they're going through the journey. You want to do your best to identify the kind of experience that they hope to get, both from your website, from your email stream, and your personal your personal conversations. And then what are the most common objections to your product or service? This can vary by type, but a lot of you, as you get into this, you start to learn this because that's what comes up, that's what they tell you when you lose the business. And don't forget to ask about that. So when you have all of this, you developed a buyer persona, and it's interesting that among 10 buyers, you'll have 2 or 3 or 4 of them that will kind of cluster in one place. And so they recommend that you name them something interesting so that they're a little bit descriptive. You know, it could be Engineer Bob for the guy who's looking for all the details and wants to know everything about everything. That would be like John Mills. He would be that kind of guy, just needs to know everything. And then on the other hand, you might have somebody that says, hey, look, just solve my problem. And you might call that whatever else that fits that. So then you take that and you have a spot in your database for persona type. And you're going to have 3 or 4 or 5 types. Now you've got not only very quick instant information about the kind of personality that this is, but you can also change the way you communicate. So if you have a very severe engineer type of person who you're dealing with on a technical product, you're not going to send foo-foo kinds of emails to them. Hey, just wanted to wish you a happy birthday. And they're going, how did they get my birthday? I don't want them to know my birthday. You know, as opposed to, hey, Joe, we had this conversation a couple of months ago. You had mentioned that you were interested in some specifications on the hoopty-doo part for your giant $1 million machine. And I just got new updated specifications, thought I'd just pass them on to you. Let me know if you have any additional questions. I'd be happy to get those answers for you. So you see, there's a big difference. You don't want to say the same thing to everybody. You want to be as targeted and personal as possible. That's where targeting really gets good, and that's how detailed you can go. Okay, so how much do people do this, and what's their primary goal when they're building content? This is just a touch off the subject, but I thought it would be interesting to transition into content to give you a sense for what people are trying to do. So this is 2019, so last year. This is from eMarketer. That their goal was to boost sales and convert customers when they were producing content. 19% were building relationships with new customers. 18% were increasing brand awareness. We kind of went through that. 16% were maintaining relationships with existing customers. And then 12% were earning more credibility. And then I don't know what this, well, what this means is they're trying to increase their search. That's a little strange to me because this ought to be, first of all, that's not the same as these others. It ought to be a separate number, separate budget, but 90% of people should be adding to their SEO value, as we've already talked about. Personalizations. Now, this is an older one, but I just wanted you to know that this, I don't believe this is true because I've been inside, at least for small business, but for large business, maybe it is. So 86% use personalization or targeted based, or they are targeted based on a broad segment and use simple clustering in order to execute campaigns. So what that means is, well, they've got it by industry. And so like, well, if we have the industry, I can check that. And that's not really what they're trying to do. And most people are, so 86% is over reported because it's self-reported. Nonetheless, the important part about these top 3 or 4 is that these people think they're doing this, okay? They use personalization and targeting based on simple business rules and execute campaigns across digital channels. So that's kind of what we're talking about. 83% think they do it. I don't think that's true, but the point here is people think they are doing a good job personalizing communications to their targeted list. That's not really that easy to do. If you have a small number of customers, you can do that. So 17 say they use real-time self-learning analytics to drive personalization targeted across digital channels. Well, only the giant companies do this, and HubSpot has the ability to do it. It's the only moderately priced application I know that can do that. What does that mean? That means that if someone is in your database in HubSpot, say, and if they have the email in there, so therefore they can be identified when they come back in. So now you know that so-and-so came back in, you know that they had an interest of X, Y, and Z. You can tell what page they were on. And because you can tell what page they were on, now you're beginning to put together some of the information we just talked about. If they are posed with they go to a certain page and they're guided to a page with a call to action on it. A call to action is simply ask us this question, do something, go to another page, read an article, look at a chart, get them to do something, but a call to action. Then, based on the call to action, you can send a follow-up email automatically with HubSpot that references that particular call to action. So if you give them a page, they're looking for a giant widget, and you take them to your giant widget page, but you show them 5 colors of giant widgets, and they click on the red one, then you would respond to the red giant widget. And that could happen automatically, increasing their usability and increasing, hopefully, their satisfaction that you're paying attention to them and you're giving them the kind of feedback and communication that they need in order to be able to go through their customer journey. Okay, so how do we actually do this? Well, I've mentioned with Info USA, first thing you have your customer list appended for key profile information. Talked about that. Number 2, you select top profiles for the target. You select for geography, demographics, and your psychographics. Step 3, you buy the prospect list with the appropriate information. And then you're ready to go in when you're talking about the overall program of building the marketing cycle, which we had at the beginning. Now you're ready, finally, you're ready to do your positioning statement. So this is what we'll be talking about. The positioning statement is something we'll be talking about in the upcoming meetings. This is perhaps the most important part, and it's the most difficult to really understand. Now, after we did all of this targeting, why is it important to position yourself? Well, the reason it's important to position yourself is that if you're selling giant widgets, there are probably 10 other companies that sell giant widgets also. They may have some different colors and may have some of the same colors. The question is, what do they expect from you? What in their mind, what do they think your company or the product itself is going to deliver to them? Is it going to be high quality? Is it going to be sophisticated? Is it going to be the best design? Is it going to be a combination of those things? Will it be the lowest price, highest value? What is it that you want them to think of? Now, you did the customer profile, and you've got several of those customer profiles done, and now you can begin to think about positioning yourselves mentally with them. And then we call part of positioning is in placement. That's really a little bit more physical. Sometimes it is like the moat strategy that we've talked about that Warren Buffett uses to protect your customers. And we have talked a little bit about both of these. But the reason that you need to go through these other discoveries and then finally getting to your target market is so that you can think of yourselves now as a certain kind of thing so that people can differentiate you from everybody else. Because when you think about it now, we haven't talked about differentiation of your company or product one time when we talked about customers. We talked about educating them, going through the journey, what their demographics are, what their lifestyles are, how you can better understand them. But we've not once said how you're going to differentiate yourself from all of your competitors. Well, we did go through a competitive analysis. And so now you combine the competitive analysis, your knowledge about customers, together with your positioning. And that's how you position yourself so that people will think of you in a certain way. So when you think of, as an example, think of Michelin tires. How are they positioned? In fact, let's just open it up for conversation. So that's a nice graphic. And well, here's where we are here, getting to positioning. Let's open it up. Does anybody know how Michelin tires is positioned? Think of the ads. Don't all jump in at once.
Well, I'm thinking of the Michelin man or the Michelin person, and I bought Michelin tires for years in New Zealand, which is a completely different demographic than, of course, we're talking about here.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were a high quality, very reliable, safe tire, is what I remember from my.
Right. Now, there's one more little element, though, that the way they communicated that. Can anybody think of what that is? You're right, John. Anybody know? Well, think back to the days when you watched TV ads, and you noticed years ago that the Michelin tire had a baby inside it, and it kind of scooted around on its butt. But it was the tire that your children would be safe. You remember that ad? It's a little old for some of you.
Yeah.
I think it's
I can picture the Michelin man, but not the baby.
Not the baby. Well, the baby was a big fat kid, you know, and they just plumped him in the tire, and they replaced the Michelin man with the baby, and then he scooted around, you know, in the tire. And the whole point there is these tires are safe enough to take your children, you know, in. And now they're supporting what you said, John, is they're safe, they're high end, you know, highly and technically advanced, all of the things that you want to put your family in, and that's their positioning. So John has got that in his mind. That's the same kind of thing that I have. I buy Michelin 95% of the time. I buy Michelin because to me, it was one of the first tires, and they were a little safer. They stop a little faster, and Michelin was the one that blew out the least and had the highest safety factor. So here I've been buying Michelin tires for a long time, and I don't know, John, you know all about cars and stuff, but what are they, a 15 or 20% premium?
Yeah, they are. In fact, I bought them until about 2 or 3 years ago when I did a comparison report. I went up and I said, well, I want to look at the best high quality. It was for a heavy duty vehicle that I had. And they came out as being one of the most premier, but then so did Kumyo, which is the Korean manufacturing company. It's actually the state of Korea company. And they came up as actually meeting every spec that Michelin had, except for one, and that was the price was 30% less.
Right, right.
So I jumped.
Yeah. Okay. And so what did they do? What they did is they positioned themselves as, well, we've got the same quality and safety built in as Michelin does, but we're cheaper. So you go back to the value diamond now, and it's like, okay, given that the service and the quality and the image is the same, I'm going to buy the cheaper one, and that's exactly what you did in that case.
In fact, yeah, their benchmark for a good tire was Michelin, and that's what they advertised. Yeah. They actually advertised a comparison with the top-end Michelin tire,
right? And
that was what they defined as a good tire.
Right, exactly. So that's an example of positioning. So just as a kind of a fun exercise, since most of you are kind of in the same boat here, in terms of developing businesses that are business services that are going to go primarily to management, how do you think about a positioning to set yourselves apart from everybody else who's trying to sell business services, which includes accountants, attorneys, fly-by-night people that call themselves consultants, of which there are millions of those. Folks who have experience, folks who don't have experience. And then you've got the breakdown of, well, what is the product that you're delivering? Accounting services, hiring services. You might be trying to do growth or marketing like I do. So you've got all of these things that people want to buy based on some need, hope that you can identify. But how will you think about positioning your companies so that you put yourself in the best marketplace for the target market? And at the same time, look a little different and have some difference in the way people position you in their mind. Okay, Edgar, let's hear from you.
I think the number one priority that I always try to market is trust, right?
Okay.
And when you're showing that show the research, often what I try to do is, let me simplify, or I market when I talk to people is, a lot of the research you do will make it even easier, because we already did a lot of research on trusting the best process that we can help you out on building or making a solution or decision on the product you're about to buy. And so when I go and talk to people, is basically trust the number one thing